Hey everyone, we still don't have quorum. We're waiting for one more person to join. So as soon as we get that person, we will get started.
And we did just have Manny join us.
Oh, perfect. Now we have quorum. All right, Chair Graves, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming half an hour early in order to get through our jam-packed agenda. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and Danielle will take it over for roll call.
All right. Member Barnett. I see you.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Baldenegro.
Here.
Alrighty. Member Devine will be absent today. Member Harper. I don't see Member Harper. Member Inocencio. I don't see him. Okay. Member Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Member Carabin will be absent. Member Roberts.
Hello.
There you are. Hi. Okay. Member, and I'm sorry for our two new members. So I know Tavi, but is your last name pronounced Sem?
Actually, I go by Tornado.
Okay. Member Tornado.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And member, is it Steffi?
Yes, Beth.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
And Chair Graves.
Present.
All right, I have all members present except for members Divine, Member Inocencio, Member Carabin, and Member Harper.
And member Inocencio just stepped in.
See that. All right.
Am I off your list, Danielle?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're not. Member Foster. Hi. Got you there. Okay, cool. And welcome, Jorge. All right.
All right, thank you for that. And at this time, I'd like to welcome our new members. It's so exciting to have new members join us for the Community Advisory Board. Congratulations. We will be having the oath of office, which Danielle will administer for us.
All right. So let me pull this up here. Okay, so I will start with Tavi, and then Beth will do yours after. So what I will do for the oath of office is I will ask you to state your name at the beginning, and then I will read the full statement and then ask if you agree once I'm done reading the statement. After you have agreed, then I will send you the oath of office to sign, and then I'll include an envelope in that so you can send it back in for signature. And we will get started. So to be, so I state your name.
Shantavi Tornado.
Right. Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Do you agree?
I agree.
Thank you, and welcome to the cab.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
All right. And Beth, your turn. So I state your name.
Beth Steffi.
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome to the cab to you as well.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. All right, and I will turn it back over to Chair Graves.
Thank you for that. And welcome once again. It's exciting, like I said, to have new members. And I think overwhelmingly, we're a little bit newer of a group, but we've got some folks here like Member Barnett. I so wanted to call you chair. So, so Member Barnett was our chair, and I will be referring to her and getting much advice from her, as she has been our chair for 5 years, and I have all esteem for you. So if you have questions, I may defer them to Member Barnett because she has the experience here. So thanks again for coming on board. At this time, I'd like to open it up to public comments.
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. And moving on to agenda item number 4 is approval of the minutes from January 27th meeting. Does anybody have a motion or any edits?
I motion that we approve the minutes as is.
And that was Manny. Does anyone have a second?
Second.
And that was Member Roberts. So as motioned, can we take a vote? Danielle, I'm gonna go unmute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take a moment to walk our new members through how this works. So if you were not at the meeting last month, then when I call your name, just simply state abstain. If you were absent from last month's meeting, you will also have to abstain from this vote. So with that said, I almost said chair also, Member Barnett.
Approve.
Okay. Member Baldonegro
Approve.
and Member Foster. You are on mute.
Sorry, I believe I was not at that meeting and need
Yes.
to abstain.
Yep. Okay. Member Inocencio.
Approve.
Okay. Member Moore.
Approve.
Member Roberts.
Aye.
Okay. Member Tornado.
Abstain.
Member Steffi.
Abstain.
Okay. And Chair Barnett. I'm sorry, Chair Graves. Oh my God, this is going to take some getting used to.
Approved.
Thank you. All right. And with that, the motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5, and that would be the CAB announcement. So at this time, this is when our CAB members can bring any community news that they would like to share for upcoming events or other announcements that may affect the CAB and our community. So at this time, if you'd like to just raise your hand and let me know if you have any announcements. I don't see anyone motioning. No, is that Member Tornado? Do you have?
I don't know if it was brought up that the library was approved for Roseland, so I wanted to record. That's a very big deal. So for District 1.
Right. So thank you so much for that. That was great information from the goal setting and budget information from last week. Very exciting. Any other bits of information, announcements? I don't see anyone wanting to do that. I do want to make mention that we're in the last few days of February and Black History Month, and Santa Rosa Junior College, as well as Sonoma State University, has great offerings. And some of those offerings are going to continue on because we're going to be celebrating Black History Month and Black Lives Matter throughout the year as appropriate as it should be. And next month, going into March, will be Women's History Month, which again, the JC, being the enormous resource that it is in our community, has an amazing offering of 9 different events during the month of March. So look for those, and you can find those on the calendar of events at the Santa Rosa Junior College. So thanks for that. After those CAB announcements, I don't see any more. I will open it up to public comment.
Also, real quick, I don't have the option of raising my hand on my screen.
Okay. You can, thanks for letting me know. If you just wave at me, I'll try to catch you.
Awesome. Can I just add to the announcements for what's happening is there is also a vaccine campaign going on from Raisa Collective that is with the Latin community and also HPs and other various doctors that is happening, and that is still going on in the coming month. Super important in terms of there will be a mass vaccination clinic open to the public soon. Just education resources there for the community. Those are great resources if you need information. HP's local collective of doctors, and then along with that, Petaluma is working on, there's also anti-Asian rhetoric that is being combated as well from community members. So be on the lookout for those.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your work last weekend putting on the Game Over event in Courthouse Square. Appreciate those efforts to get out that information. And at this time, bringing it to public comments. I think I heard you, host, saying that there was no one there.
Correct. No hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. Moving ahead to item number 6, and this is where we have staff updates. We have Danielle, do you have staff updates for us?
I do, and I also wanted to mention that Magali is here too in case there's questions that come up about anything not on what we talk about here under staff updates. So really quick, also under staff updates, this is just a brief update that we have at this time, no formal presentation. And these items are not up for discussion. However, if anyone in the group is interested in having one of these items brought back to the CAB for a future agenda item, please bring it up when we get to future agenda items later in the meeting. So as far as the community empowerment plan, right now there's no new updates. Open government work that we are doing here at the city, there is an open government task force subcommittee meeting on March 10th, starting at 5:30. So that's in a few weeks. Empowerment subcommittee members, I know that is the next date of our subcommittee meeting. So I will work with your group to reschedule that meeting as our staff will be involved in the subcommittee meeting for the Open Government Task Force. In addition to that, the council will be holding a study session on the initial implementation of the Open Government Ordinance and evaluation of those initial implementation steps. That'll happen on March 23rd. Usually study sessions start around 3 p.m., but there'll be more information around time once the final agenda is published. Moving on to inclusion, diversity, and equity, we have a couple of updates there. The equity officer position for the city is the hiring process is moving right along. from what I have been told, we're getting closer to hiring a final candidate or selecting a final candidate for hire. I believe they're going through the interview process now. So more to come on that information. Hello, little Magali's child. In addition to the equity officer, we have our staff here at Community Engagement and the Violence Prevention Partnership are looking for additional training options to follow Dr. Washington's presentation on deconstructing race and racism. So we're looking at a couple of different topics around race, racism, and equity. And Magali has more information on that coming up. So we're just looking into, I believe, different trainers who are available and looking at different dates for that. And then my final update is the general plan update for the city. The general plan update team sent out a community survey to all residents in Santa Rosa via not all residents, but as many as they could, via email or distribution list. It's posted on the general plan update website. I believe it's called Santa Rosa Forward 2050. And I sent the CAB the other day the link to the survey, and would love it if everyone could take that survey as well as send it out to your community contacts and encourage others to take that survey as well. It's in English and in Spanish for our new members. I will send you the survey link as well because I believe I may not have been able to send it to both of you when I did. So I will get that out to both of you. And with that, those are my updates. I don't know if Magali wants to jump in with any more. I will turn it over to her.
I think you covered most of it. I think I heard you state some of the information about the equity work that we're hoping to be doing. But other than that, it was good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Great. And I heard you say right before you gave us all of that great information that this was not open for discussion. Do we want to open this up for questions from Kat?
Yeah, questions are fine. Go ahead.
All right. So at this time, if you have any questions for these staff updates from our members, raise your hand. Let me see that you are interested.
Also, if anyone has any ideas around equity trainings that they'd like to see, please send those to me via email or even type them in the chat here. That way I can document those and get them over to those members of our team who are working on putting that together.
I might just go around the screen as I see it to see if anybody has any questions for you. So okay. I'll start with Member Roberts.
I don't have any questions right now.
Thank you. Member Barnett.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Member Foster.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Member Tornado.
No questions.
Thank you. Member Moore.
No questions.
And thanks, Member Baldenegro.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Steffi.
No questions at this time.
Great. Member, Member Jorge Incencio, I want to really make sure that I get your last name correct when I pronounce it.
Sure.
Can you pronounce your last name for me so that I make sure I do?
Yeah, it's Inocencio. Inocencio.
Inocencio. Okay, so I pronounced that first O.
Yeah, Inocencio. It's just very phonetic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for helping me out. So
no questions.
No questions. Thanks.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's no questions at this time. So I had one question actually. Do you know the deadline for the general plan community survey, Santa Rosa Forward? I don't
No.
remember seeing it.
I don't. Magali, do you know that by chance?
I don't know it off. I could look it up really quick,
Okay.
but if not, I'll make sure we get it out to everybody.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. At this time, I'll open the staff updates to public comments.
No hands raised for public comment.
Great. Any lingering further comments from the CAB members? I don't see any, so we'll be moving ahead to our first scheduled item, which is a presentation from Jason Nutt, who has joined us. Welcome, Jason Nutt. You're the Assistant City Manager, and he will be providing us a presentation on the Capital Improvement Program. And you should have received that overview in the email from Danielle, but I believe that will also be on our screens and as part of a share screen. So.
All right, good evening, Chair Graves and members of the Community Advisory Board. I'm Jason Nutt. I'm the Assistant City Manager, but I'm also the Director of Transportation and Public Works. So I am here to do a couple of quick things. I'm promised to make this as quick as I can since you have a full evening. The Community Advisory Board's charter does require that you review the CIP priorities every year. We've done this in a number of different ways through the course of the last 4 or 5 years. This year, we're going to do it a little differently, even more, simply because COVID has kept us from being out in the public and being able to try to solicit additional feedback. Would certainly like to work with you moving forward, as well as with the council, to try to come up with a better plan so that we can ensure public participation in the development of our priorities for the capital improvement program. All right, now, there we go. Okay, next slide, please. Just to start us off, I want to give all of you a little bit of a background. The city currently has about $5 billion worth of total assets in its inventory. When we say assets, that's all of the public related infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, fire hydrants, storm drains, sewer, water. We are not a dry utility, so we do not have gas or electric, but we do maintain all of the wet inventory, meaning water, sewer, and storm drain systems. It includes traffic signals. We also own and operate the Laguna Treatment Plant out off of Llano Road. And we have 109 parks and a little over 1,000 acres of public space. This is just kind of just a quick snapshot and example of the things that the city is responsible for that make up that $5 billion worth of total assets. The capital improvement program every year is a way for us to be able to identify how we're going to do capital investment to ensure that these assets are maintained in the future. So next slide, please. So one of the questions we get asked most often is, where do the projects come from? How do you determine which new infrastructure you're going to build and how you're going to maintain the infrastructure in the future? So we look at a number of goals. We look at master plans, we look at area plans, we have community conversations, and that's how we draw feedback and information from the general public. We draw it from our own documentation, which is generated through public discussion and dialogue, and it gives us specific actions. In some cases, it also gives us some generalized actions. Those generalized actions turn into additional studies. So for example, we're currently talking about the Stony Point Road corridor for bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. That came out of conversations in the Bike and Ped Master Plan that said, we think you need to go a little bit further and do additional study. So those are the types of programs that we're moving forward with that help generate projects that we would incorporate and insert into the capital plan every year. Next slide, please. Now, the capital improvement program is great, but some of our funds have very specific sources and requirements on how you spend those monies. So just to give you a snapshot from the current fiscal year, we had about $62 million of capital funding to invest. And the pie chart it shows how that funding came to be, which sources it came from. which means some of those sources you have to put right back too. So we have about $13.3 million of water utility funds. That's the water distribution system. Money that's associated with that part of the water enterprise has to go back into that water enterprise. I can't use that funding source to go and repave a roadway or to build a park. Similarly, where we have Measure M funds, which is the regional roadway sales tax fund that we just reauthorized this November as Go Sonoma, those funds come in and they have a very specialized purpose. They can be used for roadways, for sidewalks, for bike lanes, for pedestrian enhancements, traffic signals, but again, I can't utilize that to do a water or sewer improvement. So this just kind of gives you an idea of all of that list of projects that we may be generating from these plans and these studies. They have certain buckets of money that may be available. Then it's a function of figuring out, well, how are we going to go through and prioritize those projects with these funding sources every year? So if you could go to the next slide, please. How we do this is we look at projects that have regulatory or mandated timeframes associated with them or conditions. We look at our asset age, the condition of the facility and asset, and we rank those as worst to best. To give you an example of how that might work, we utilize pavement condition index as a way to demonstrate how a roadway is ranked. Pavement condition index is a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being a perfectly new road built yesterday, because then the day after it is no longer a 100, it's a 99, just my joke, traffic engineer. And then 0 would be basically a gravel road. It'd be something where the pavement condition is just fully failed. We want to make sure that we're investing our money in a strategic and an appropriate way. And so we use that ranking system to help us determine which funding source and how we think and when we think it should be invested. We look at the specificity of the funding. I just kind of covered that in the slide with the pie chart. Certain funding sources have to have certain projects associated with it. We go out and we look for community input. This is anywhere from the inquiries we receive on a daily basis from the general public. I just, for example, today got 2 inquiries from the southwest part of town asking about intersection evaluation. And so that might then turn around and generate a capital improvement. We also look at opportunistic. Hey, if there's a grant fund out there that I think I can apply one of these projects to, whether it's a high priority or not, I'm going after the money, because any money is good money. We want to make sure that we're bringing in and investing whatever we can to make sure that we're getting all of those facilities out into the public and well maintained. And then of course it goes back to a level of plan prioritization. Next slide, please. When we think about prioritization, what staff has done at this point is we've tried to break this into high, moderate, and low priority projects. From a high priority project, these are the ones that we're actively putting money to. It's fire-related project, it's projects that have public safety issues, it's those regulatory or mandated projects, it's projects that have a grant fund associated or grant funded component to it that may have a deadline that we have to comply with. It's projects that show up in the council priority, things in the downtown, things that are homeless related. Those are things that have been driving us in the last 12 months. We look at environmental conditions where we actually have to make a requirement. For example, we just completed a project in our corporation yard associated with our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. That's a big, long word. We acronym is NPDES. But we had to conform with that or else we'd be found in violation, which would result in fines and fees. Those are the things that we identify as highest priority, and we try to push that out in those ways. Things that are maybe low or moderate priority are things that we're still trying to design. They're not fully vetted yet. We haven't quite gone through the development stage of the process or the scoping. But they're things where we might say, hey, there's some opportunity coming up and we need to prep for this. It might not fit the high priority, but we think we need to get in a position so that if federal funding or if some opportunistic funding comes available, we're in a position to be able to apply for or receive those funds. Also moderate type of priorities are things that, like I said, are in the planning and design phase, stuff that we're working through the system on a systematic and methodical way. Stuff that we would consider low priority, these are things that we're just trying not to lose track of, right? There are projects that we have on our list that are 10 years old that have just never made it to that top priority, but they are a priority to some folks, and we don't want to lose them. We don't want them to fall off. So we try to keep them invested in our long-term planning as best as we can. Next slide, please. So we do have a few upcoming initiatives that are going to help focus some additional projects. One is we're talking with the community through a series of community meetings regarding the Measure M Parks for All measure that was passed in 2018. This is a 1/8 cent sales tax measure that comes to the city for the benefit and value of managing, maintaining, and improving our park system. We're looking at council's request. We're talking to the public about how best to invest that. Comes out to about $1.9 million a year, and we want the public to help us decide where those funds should best be invested to the benefit of our community. I mentioned the Stony Point Road Corridor study. Pretty soon we're going to be looking at the Mendocino Avenue corridor, looking at land use plans and how better to engage and initiate development in that area that fits the type of landscape we'd like to see moving forward. And of course, I hope all of you are invested in the downtown station area plan. That specific plan process that just concluded in December has been critical and important to the way with which we're organizing our downtown area and how we expect that to grow in the future. But there are projects that are being generated from that based on the type of development that they're proposing. Some of the things that we're contemplating here within the city over the next years, we're looking at how we might do a better capital prioritization plan. So I kind of outlined for you what prioritization program we use right now, but that's really a staff-driven process. And while staff, we like to think we're the most intelligent folks in the room, I guarantee we're not always. We do have a level of expertise which helps us build this, but without input from the community, without input from our partners in the various boards and commissions and the council, we are lacking a component of that prioritization process that we think is going to be important. And I referenced the city of Oakland. They, this last year, went through a process that looks really interesting, and I'm excited to be able to give this a shot, try to run it through our system to see if this is something that our council may want to see us adopt moving forward that may help engage the community in the development of our prioritization plan. And then, of course, as it stands right now, we do a single year budget, not only from our full operations within the city, but on the capital improvement side, we're doing a 1 year. On average, it takes us anywhere from 30 to 48 months to deliver a project from conception to completion. When you do a single year project and a single year prioritization program, priorities shift almost more rapidly than we're able to deliver that project. And so we want to consider the potential to adopt a longer term capital improvement program so that priorities don't shift quite as quickly, so that we're better able to deliver the projects that the community and the council are expecting us to deliver. Next slide. So here's why I'm here today. I'm this close to being finished. I'd be interested in getting any feedback from you. Are there any project selection processes or criteria that we may be missing that you think we should take into consideration as we go through this process this upcoming year? What kind of prioritization criteria are missing? I'll give you an example of one as I've been having informal discussions with council members. There was an idea that maybe we should have a discussion of district equity. I don't know quite what that means. In fact, the council members I talked with didn't quite know what that meant. But the idea is nowhere in our process do we actually have district anywhere listed in prioritization programming. We list council priorities. So that might be something that you may be interested in. And then, of course, the last item here is do you have different ways that you might suggest we solicit feedback from the community? Zoom obviously is the newest format. While all of us are getting really tired of being in this virtual space all day long, it actually has drawn out quite a bit more community members than we've seen in the past. Participation has gone up, and that's a really great thing. But I think there's something to be said about face-to-face interactions. And I just wanted to see if you had any perspective on this that could help us as we look toward building these plans moving forward. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I'd certainly love any feedback that the board might have.
Thank you for that presentation. I realize that we're challenging you to go a little fast forward on that, and I appreciate your timeliness and having all of that information so well organized for all of us that might be hearing some of this for the first time. So I want to open it up to any questions or comments. I'm going to get my screen here back in a way that I can see all of you. All right. As I can see right now, I think all of your microphones are muted. If you unmute your microphone, that's also a signal. Member Tornado, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just want to go back to participation amongst community members, right? So you're saying that is more participation with Zoom. What is the turnout, and what have you seen the increase, like number-wise and percentage-wise to you?
Yeah, I mean, typically, I'll use our Measure M meeting as an example. Right before the pandemic, we held a Measure M Parks for All conversation at the Turk Round Barn. We had roughly 50 to 60 individuals show up, which was actually a phenomenal turnout for the type of public meetings we typically hold. When we did another one recently over Zoom, we were nearly 100 people. So we saw an increase in the number of folks that wanted to be there. We saw similar things when we talked about like the Finley social safe distancing site that occurred and the public meeting that we saw there. I would never have expected 150 participants. I don't think that many folks would have shown up to the council chambers to have that kind of discussion. I believe that the comfort of being able to participate from your couch has made it easier for people to express their opinions to us. I recognize that there is a digital divide with part of our community, and I don't think that this is the only format we should look, but I do think it provides us other opportunities.
Right, that's one of the things I wanted to address is there interpreters there available for our marginalized communities, Spanish speaking, just to bridge that gap, especially with technology. And you know, there are some folks that aren't able to access.
Yeah, and we have started the regular practice of having Spanish interpreters at meetings and available on the Zoom. There have been some decisions about when an interpreter is dedicated to a meeting and when an interpreter is included upon request. And so some of those are working their way through the system. A lot of this process, and I'm sure Magali and Danielle have described this over the course of time, the processes have been changing in the last year and even changing more rapidly because of the Zoom format. I think we're going to set ourselves up for a much better, more interactive process once we get out of the pandemic. But I would direct some of those questions to Magali. You might be better off able to describe how we're managing our monolingual populations.
Sure, and I could just add that, you know, we are looking at, you know, with the city council meeting, adding translation there and adding it in other spaces. But we also want to be super intentional about, you know, how we do the outreach as well, because the problem with Zoom is that we don't know, like, if people are logging into the Spanish translation. So we have to figure out, like, what's sort of another mechanism that we could use to track that. And then also equally doing the sufficient amount of outreach that it takes to get folks to know what the meeting is going to be about, and then to give them ample time to, you know, to be able to make it. So we are working towards a lot of those efforts, and so that there will be more to come, especially also through the Open Government Task Force. And Danielle, did I miss anything?
No, you covered it all.
Thank you for that, Magali. And also, Jason, you spoke on briefly on helping the unsheltered community and input. How do you gather input for that? And
so the projects that we select predominantly come through our homeless services division at the city. They're basically a client of ours. If you look at our project delivery team, they'll identify a particular project through their solicitation processes, and then they will come to us and ask us to help them deliver that and bring it to fruition.
Amazing, thank you. And then you touched on, sorry, y'all, I just have a few questions. You touched on the Oakland process that you were excited about. Do you have the name for that?
I'm happy to go ahead and provide the slideshow to Magali and Danielle, and they can send it out to you so you can see what they went through recently.
Yeah, I feel like I know what you're talking about. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head. I've only looked through the slide deck the once, but I was pretty excited, and our new chief financial officer was the one that brought it to my attention. So it's still a little fresh for me.
Okay, I mean, and what is your CFO's name?
CFO is Jan Mazik.
Thank you. All right, and then yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those were great questions. Do I see anyone else with questions or comments?
So you've got member Inocencio and member Roberts. Their hands are virtually raised.
Great, thank you. And I saw member Foster, I see you there as well. So we'll start with member Inocencio.
Great, thank you. I have kind of a series of questions. The first was in the budget, kind of the pie chart that you had there. So what funding sources can be used freely for the capital improvement projects? Which ones don't have a bucket?
Yeah, so general fund is the only product that doesn't have a bucket. We average about $2 million a year of general funds from the city council. A majority of that is allocated through the process to our accessibility enhancement program. And so of the 2 million, about 1.2 million we put aside toward improving pathways, sidewalks, and access for our disabled individuals, both visually and ably. That is the most flexible source that we have. This last year for 2020, 2021, that you saw that pie chart, council actually removed all the general fund out of the capital improvement program in an effort to stabilize the city's budget that was looking at a shortfall. They felt that was an appropriate course of action to delay and defer those projects to make sure that we're able to have our long-term operational budget intact.
Okay. And the other question was, or kind of, I guess, comment regarding the project selection process. You were asking what criteria is missing. And one thing that I've encountered a lot actually is kind of, there's no way to weigh quality of life, meaning what small projects are gonna have a big impact on a specific community. You know, there are a few traffic intersections where adding a light is gonna well, people think it'll ease up traffic and things like that. Adding a bench here, a path here, expanding a certain park. I don't see any of that in kind of how we're selecting the process or how projects are being selected. So is that something that the city has given thought to, or is that weighed in any way?
You know, that's an excellent point to bring up. It's something we haven't used in the past because quality of life has been a little bit difficult to gauge. However, as I've been meeting with regional boards and commissions and some of the processes they're going through, the concept of quality of life is definitely coming up, and it's more focused in on diversity and gentrification in an effort to try to sustain livability within the communities that individuals are in, and investing capital funds to build those facilities, to build that public infrastructure to ensure that the quality of life remains in those communities. And so absolutely, that's a great point, and I'll write that down and see how we can incorporate something like that as we move forward.
Okay. And then I guess the final comment was regarding kind of sort of equity and infrastructure, right? I feel like the current general plan that we have and how we're weighing it, I don't see how certain neighborhoods can be prioritized. And I think if we're investing at the same level throughout all of Santa Rosa, neighborhoods that are behind are kind of always going to be behind if there's no way to put a metric to that. So that's just one comment that I had. I'm sure you've encountered. And then finally, for the where to get participation or how and where to get participation, I'm a strong believer in sometimes you have to go out there, like door to door sometimes, and talk to people, specifically in kind of groups of or neighborhoods that haven't participated as much. You know, a lot of times people don't know how to participate or that they can even participate in these things. So I think going door to door on a very small basis, I think is a great idea to get some really good feedback.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that feedback.
And that was it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are important points. Now turning it over to Member Roberts. Up next after him will be Member Foster, and Member Moore after Member Foster. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Nutt. I wanted to weigh in on the criteria, but I didn't have any new ideas, but I want to throw my support behind the districts that you mentioned. And I was curious if there's ever been any kind of inventory for all these assets done by district, and if how you might go about comparing the assets in different districts. Because I've heard comments about the west side, particularly the southwest, having less resources than the east side. I don't know what the inventory would say, if it would agree with that, but just curious how the district comparison could happen.
Yeah, thank you for that. We haven't actually done the specific identification of where assets are. I mean, we have all the information, but we haven't run the models yet. I can tell you intuitively that there's absolutely no correlation between district equity when it comes to assets. Every district is going to be dramatically different. You know, we have a majority of our building and facility assets live in District 5, where none exist in District 6. Or you know, I mean, we're kind of all over the board when it comes to the way our asset inventory exists here. That the districts were not built to try to balance those facilities out, and so when we think about, and that was kind of why when I discussed this with council members, we couldn't really identify what district equity meant, because there's so much inequity already built in with those facilities that we're not likely ever going to be able to spend the same amount of money from one district to the next. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't invest. It just means the investments will be targeted potentially differently by district based on the needs of that community, and not necessarily in the same equitable format. I will tell you, I used to work for Sonoma County and Marin County. The way they do district equity is they slice the financial pie into equitable pieces. And I can tell you it's definitely not equitable. And it sometimes creates very challenging rollouts for projects, because we have sometimes pots or slices of the financial pie that are too small to actually do anything tangible. But to some extent, I'm sort of waiting for that conversation to build at the city council level. But I do think, you know, your question is spot on. How are we going to identify this? And is that a way that we can utilize, or is that a criteria we can utilize for increasing the ranking and the priority for a project? So I appreciate that.
And that was all of your questions, Member Robert?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Member Foster.
Yeah, hi, Jason. Thank you for your presentation. I
You did a great job. Appreciate it. I'm curious about the Mendocino Avenue corridor study. What is that?
So our planning and economic development department is going to be evaluating land use along the corridor, very similar to what we did in the downtown. It's going to be a specific plan-oriented discussion that updates an existing plan that was done back in the mid-2000s. And it's really to look at what type of land uses, compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, activity in the area, and trying to develop that more focused evaluation, something that the general plan would generally be too high a level. And so that more detailed focus, as I mentioned, is one of those places where from a capital or a city infrastructure standpoint, it may generate specific projects that the city would take on and invest in to the benefit of that area.
What about the geography? What are we talking about between what areas? Where does it start and where does it end?
I'm not exactly sure. I'll tell you the prior program that occurred in the mid-2000s started at College Avenue and went up to Bicentennial. And it really looked at a fairly narrow portion of the corridor. It was really like one property in, and that was about the extent of the land use. With some of the conversations we've been having with the county about their administration center, with the junior college and some of the work that they're doing, you know, it's possible that you get a larger expansion in and around certain properties. But I haven't actually seen the defined boundary that they're intending to do for this specific study. I think that would be a good question if we could, you know, to pose to Claire Hartman. I think she'd be able to give you a very specific answer of what they intend to look at as they bring that forward this summer.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that clarification on especially the geography of that corridor plan or study, I should say. At this time, the questions go to Member Moore.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason, for the presentation. I'm glad the Mendocino Avenue question was answered. That was one of mine. On the question of quality of life and equity, I remember when the county did the portrait of Sonoma and looking at different public health, economic, different factors to determine the quality of life and lifespan. And that was a really good piece of data to make a whole bunch of decisions to help bring areas of need up and to provide services. And I don't know if there's any discussions anywhere about doing another study similar to that, but that might be helpful in being used as part of the criteria in making the decisions around projects. And I think, I'm not saying that's the answer, but I think exploring some sort of research on that would be really helpful because it sounds like the city's been inequitable at the inception, really. And so to kind of continue that, even if you don't intend to not address inequities, but by continuing it, we are. And so in the interim of perhaps doing some research and some data collection on standard of living, income, health, disease, you know, all those social determinants of health, could you identify some markers in these capital improvements? Like I was looking at your slides and maybe just, I'm not saying this is it, but like take fire hydrants, like is there equitable across the board there, or just certain things that are so common, like are we sure that everyone has enough of those? And so that would just be a kind of a train of thought to think about At least that's what I was thinking about when you were talking.
That's great. I appreciate the reference to the portrait of Sonoma. I think you're spot on that that's a good place for us to start to understand how to incorporate potentially that quality of life component. Like I said, I know that there are other regional agencies such as the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that are really trying to gain information about how to incorporate that aspect into our decision making relating to capital investment. So yeah, I'll definitely be looking at how we can build that locally and how it matches with some of our partner agencies around the region.
There's also another study that's done called the Social Progress Index. And it's kind of like a report card at the global, continental, state, county level. It's a really good report that can really bring out issues of inequity. And so I would recommend looking at something like that as well.
Very good, thank you.
And I had one, like everyone, I've got a series of questions just because we have to save them. So, so I write them down. In terms of roads and knowing that the county, especially in East Santa Rosa and maybe South, I'm not sure about South, Southwest, Southeast, but the county roads really intermingle, just the boundary lines, and it seems like the roads are really crappy at those points. And how are you working with the county to hold them accountable to bring neighborhoods that really need new roads up to par? Because a lot of the straight Santa Rosa city streets seem to be in much better shape than the county, but I've noticed that those neighborhoods that it would just really upgrade some of the neighborhoods if they had roads and kind of felt like they were being paid attention to.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question, actually. It seems like it shouldn't be, but it is. Those little county pockets create quite a challenge for investment strategies, especially at the county level. And both the city and the county struggle from a lack of financing. On the city side, I can tell you when it comes to roads, just to kind of maintain the status quo, we need to invest about $23 million a year. Actually, that's to keep our roads in good condition and to bring those that aren't in good condition up to good condition. About 23 million a year. We currently have about 11 million that we invest. The county's actually in a much more severe deficit mode. When it boils down to it, it's going to be pretty rare that we're ever actually going to come in and do a reconstruction on a residential street, either the city or the county level. The communities that are getting the full reconstruction are ones that are having water and sewer work. And so when the utility is coming through and doing substantial underground reconstruction, that's our opportunity to actually see those roads rebuilt. Streets in the city that are in good condition to begin with, we are working hard to keep in good condition. And you'll see us do an implementation or it's a topical program called a slurry seal. It looks like paint. We get a lot of complaints that it looks like really bad paving, but it does a great job of maintaining that surface for an additional 10 years at a cost that's about 1/10 it would be to reconstruct and place new pavement. I understand the concern. I just don't have a great answer.
Well, and I hear everything that you're saying, and I can totally empathize with the challenges that just partnering and I appreciate you kind of laying out the specific challenges, like on the road that it goes to the sewer first. But honestly, when you see, and when you said keeping the roads we have in good condition, but when you see really sort of high-end neighborhoods being repaved over and over, and you're hitting potholes in lower income neighborhoods that in part look lower income because of the roads, perception is reality in a lot of ways. And so I would urge your teams to take advantage of the community's interest in finding and repairing health and just inequities in general, to really try to get a outside bird's view to saying, is how we do it the right way, and how can we make that 10-year plan to change it? Because how is it going to change otherwise, unless the city wins the lotto, which is never going to happen because of all the fires and disasters and all the other stuff that are happening. So it's the influx of money is not going to be there. So the only way to change is in baby steps from within.
Yeah, and I totally understand where you're coming from. We actually did a pretty detailed presentation to the Community Advisory Board about 3 or 4 years ago. Cherie was instrumental in coining a phrase of alligatoring, and she had this great image in her head that she tried to explain to her fellow members. It is actually a very much more complicated process than it sounds. Paving and maintaining streets actually does have a science to it. It is not an equitable science, and I don't want to take the time. I'd be happy to come back and provide you the rationale behind it, and we could discuss how to make potential changes moving forward. But there is a rhyme and a reason as to why certain things happen. And you are right, it's not necessarily equitable. It is entirely based on our fiscal constraint and trying to keep from sliding deeper and deeper into the hole. And so I absolutely understand. I can tell you the street I live on will absolutely never get repaved. It's hard to imagine that I'm in charge of the paving crew and they're never going to do it in my street.
So I think what would be of interest, I know for myself, is how does the community participate? I mean, we're not subject experts by any means like you are and understand the science of pavement. And that, by the way, is just an example of anything on here. But how does the community, other than saying, please pave my street, and not really understanding that will never happen because of all the reasons you said, how do we weigh in at a deeper level that can provide the critical thinking and some of the questions and outside the box thinking that could move us in the direction that I think we all really want to go? And I
think that's a great question. That is part of what I was looking for is if there's there's certainly a conversation that we need to have with the community to not only describe what our limitations might be, but also to gain a better understanding about how we might try to do it differently. We also had a conversation several years ago about the concept of participatory budgeting. It's a very challenging way to deal with this type of condition-based improvement, but the idea of gaining public perception and information back that might help guide some of our activities and inform the community at the same time. I'm following you, and I know that's not an easy or a clear answer, but I think the point you're raising is one that is something that I need to focus on how to better gain feedback and provide information.
That would be great, and I know this isn't the only thing you do, and then you have tons of challenges, but in order to not be perceived as just taking lip service, I think it's important.
Okay. I really appreciate that. Even though I didn't give you a great answer, I actually think that was very helpful to me.
Hey, just don't put me on that 10-year list, because I don't want to be there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I saw a transition happening in the works. We are now going to Member Barnett, who you mentioned just a few minutes ago.
Good evening. Thank you, Jason. It's been a long, strange road, my friend.
Yes, it has.
I want to say 2014, and I want to thank Member Moore for bringing up the portrait of Sonoma County. And this board actually received a presentation from Beth Dadko on the portrait of Sonoma County. And I'm sure it's in my email archives, and I'd love, we can share that with the board if people they didn't get a chance to see it when it came out. But it's an excellent tool in the toolbox for this. And yes, Jason, I was the one that gets you. So that presentation, just to give people an idea, because I was a lot like Carly was, I was mad about roads and neighborhoods. And I'm like, got all these terms and knowledge and found out a very big, long depth of an issue that is roads, and that nobody realizes. Roads are local. Streets are local. It is a local issue and no one's coming. It is 100% on us. And I was under the impression that was not the case, that there's somehow this other metric out there. And it's like, no, roads are local. And if we want to improve it, we have to do it from us. It has to come from us. It has to come from all of us. And it's a heavy lift. And I am astonished from the time you gave that presentation to now to see how much heavy lifting your team has done. It's very awesome for me. Prime example I can just point to is I remember the time I learned the term alligator cracking, and I have seen in the last 6 years how much your team has gone out and tackled alligator cracking in neighborhoods. And I have seen what happened with Fulton Road, and I am stoked beyond stoked at that. And I wish there was a way that there was a pot of money that every road in our city could match what we have on Fulton Road, because it is immaculate and I love it on a whole multitude of levels. My questions for you, because of course I have to give all the praise, and then I have to go, and by the way, Roseland annexation. And this is a big one for me when we're talking about infrastructure priorities. And I had a meeting with Jorge and we were talking about Roseland, and then I started looking at overview maps of Roseland and realized that in a lot of ways, Roseland has been treated like East Germany was treated post World War II. And the disparity is stark and abundant, and we've all walked through or ridden through, we know it, we see it. But now Roseland is part of Santa Rosa. And in that annexation process, I feel like if we're going to talk about CIP priorities at some level, and this is going to be a heavy lift, and I honestly don't have the answer of how we make this happen. I don't have that answer, but I cannot stand by and not bring it up that it has to become a priority, that Roseland annexation has to be looked at in the view of, until Roseland is at the same level of infrastructure priority that all other aspects of the city are, Santa Rosa is not whole. And we can't quantify ourselves as a whole city, because that to me is glaring. And it's such a big lift on so many levels. It's water, it's sewer, it's sidewalks, it's parks, it's green space, it's trails, it's open space, it's public art. It is massive undertaking. But I feel like on a certain level, we as a city have to either bring forward a full-scale measure where we own it and vote a tax in or vote a bond measure in that is specifically to this, that we're going to do this as a priority. Or when we're having these larger discussions around CIP and a 10-year vision and possibly taking the budget out multiple years, bringing it into that discussion at that level. So that was my first piece.
Well, let me just tell you, we're on the cusp of you being able to see some fantastic improvements and changes. Awesome. So, the concept that we'll be investing nearly $3 million in roadway improvements over the next 3 years. We'll be working very closely with South Park Sanitation. We're working with the county to start to take over components of that district. So the improvements are getting made that are consistent with things that are going on in the rest of the city. From a traffic standpoint, we've invested quite a bit of time. We've replaced just about every sign to bring it up to standard. There are definitely deficiencies out there relating to bike and ped improvements. The park improvements are still needing to be made. But I do want you to say that there's an investment that is on the cusp of going into place. I can only apologize for some of that because it should have happened a couple of years ago, and our priority internally got redirected. I've given them a tongue lashing for never letting that happen again. And so there is currently a focus on making sure that backlog of investment occurs here beginning this upcoming summer.
That's awesome news. I have another question, and that I may be asking you, and I might need to be actually asking Eric McHenry, but I think that the two of you guys talk, and this is about the My Santa Rosa app. Back in 2014, at the end of your presentation, just surged, I don't know, the universe worked out. Eric came to our board with the My Santa Rosa app. I understand it got taken offline and it became a little more complicated, and that now it's a web page or whatnot, but when Carly brought up what we can do as a board when we're doing community outreach, when we're, and just to give the board preference, in 2014, we went out because we worked with Jason on this in the CIP program, went out to our neighborhoods and did some on the ground, following up with neighbors that had asked the city questions, gone out and kind of tried to figure out most bang for the buck, because Jason went to the city with a specific ask with the community advisory board, and we asked for extra money and we got it. And we were able to kind of look at overlap city maps and kind of figure out what we could do with that pot of money for the most amount of improvements to the neighborhoods that we were trying to do this work with. And My Santa Rosa app was somewhat helpful with that. I wanted to know if there's been any update on that, as far as, is there a simple, easy, because the thing about it that was great is it went pretty high up the food chain. And so if a neighbor got the tools in the toolbox and were able to interact with someone and bring the stuff forward, it was responded to rather quickly. And I wanted to also find out, is the pothole line still got a 72-hour turnaround? Is that still kind of where the goal matches?
That's the goal. It still exists, and that is the goal. On the My Santa Rosa app, as you mentioned, the app itself is kind of defunct. It's now a web page. City is looking at purchasing a new app. We're waiting for some other technology to come on before we launch that app. We're hoping that that'll happen late summer, and we'll see if it all turns itself around the way we've started to plan it.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned the Mendocino corridor, and this is one of these tricky questions, and it kind of segues into what Carly had said about Santa Rosa. So I have a question about Santa Rosa Avenue in terms of economic development. I feel like it's a gap in our city in that we have a lot of economic activity. We have neighborhood intersect. We have historic neighborhoods, but it's disconnected to make, and I found this out the hard way because I biked to and from work, and my assignment was to bike. I was out in Rohnert Park. So I rode it every week and realized there's some pretty big gaps with Santa Rosa Avenue. And I think one of the problems might be what Carly was indicating, and it could be that it's got county islands, or that there's some intersect points that are, that could be part of what I'm looking at. But I wanted to know, so the Mendocino Avenue corridor, I'm guessing, is going to stop at the transition point. And I'm wondering, is Santa Rosa Avenue ever going to get is it ever going to get that opportunity down the road? Because I think it's a lost opportunity, in my opinion.
So there is a piece of Santa Rosa Avenue that already has, within the downtown, that had a specific plan that then got rolled into, the downtown specific plan. And that's the stretch from Sonoma Avenue down to Maple. We have actually implemented capital programs or capital projects that were associated with that, and we have additional projects coming. The stretch south of Bennett Valley Road, I'm not aware of any such program, but I think that would be a great conversation to bring up in the general planning process. If we believe that's an area that should have some additional focus, I think that would be something that we would want to bring up to Claire and the community development and engagement team.
Okay. And then one other thing I want to bring up, and you were asking about metrics for investment. Historic preservation, and I don't know if Steve Rabinowitz with Waterways has asked you or talked to you about this, but there's another gap issue with our long-term planning, and that is long-term sustainability of our assets. And specifically, Prince Memorial Greenway was the example that he brought forward. And I when I saw that, I don't know how to best articulate it, but that was something I felt like he's right. And I don't know how you articulate that into a measurement, but I feel like it's something that we need to be looking at, because the Prince Memorial Greenway is a jewel of the city, but the long-term maintenance is something that we didn't codify, and it's coming back to bite us now. And as far as like when we talk about things that are prioritized, I think that's something that needs to be thought forward, and I'm hoping it gets included with the general plan as well.
I hope it will. I know our new chief financial officer really has a focus in on that. You know, don't build or accept an asset that you don't have the funding to be able to maintain in perpetuity, which seems to make sense. Unfortunately, it's an expensive proposition that we don't always do turnkey evaluation on. So I think you'll be pleased as you follow her conversation over the course of the next year, as she starts to integrate some thoughts into our process. That's one of the things that she's looking at.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. It's always a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate it.
Great. I see Member Foster's hand up for a follow-up question, but I want to first make sure if there's any other, and I see Member Tornado as well. Is there any questions from Member Steffi or Member Aldenegro, who I don't believe had a chance just yet? No? Okay. All right.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And first, Member Foster, I saw your hand.
Yeah, Jason, what, as far as the opportunity zone and Roseland, what kind of activity or action are we seeing there? I mean, how many projects and what's going on with the opportunity zone?
The opportunity zone provides opportunities. It has
I understand that, but I mean, I'm wondering if people are actually, you know, proposing projects and buying and developing and doing, you know, what it was designed for.
On the public side, it hasn't generated any specific or tangible activity. It's given us options to be able to apply for things and incorporate. As far as private development goes, I don't actually have that information. I'd need to direct you to the planning team. They'd be able to tell you exactly how well it's working, or if it's still such a new concept that it hasn't really gotten off the ground.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then as far as like a Mello-Roos type of bond financing for that area, I know Mello-Roos is typically a residential type, and it's essentially gone away, but is there something that has replaced that can be put in place to raise the capital needed to do the improvements in Roseland?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a number of different financing mechanisms. They all come in the form of taxation, unfortunately, whether it's a property tax, a property assessment, or a sales tax. But yes, there are a number of funding mechanisms to do that. There's a second mechanism that we've started to talk about, which is an enhanced infrastructure finance district. That would be focused in and around the Sebastopol Road corridor, as an example, or in the downtown. What that does is it kind of gives a little bit of a look at what redevelopment used to be. It takes the tax increment from the baseline to the enhanced with the new development, and it pulls that component of increased tax revenue and sets it aside for specific capital investment. It's a new version, so it is not the redevelopment districts of old. It only utilizes the increased revenue associated with that specific government entity's portion. And so that is a way that is a product that we're looking at right now. And we're looking at it in a combination with the county to see if we do this as a joint effort, both in the downtown and the Sebastopol Road corridors.
I mean, a lot of these types of taxes, bond financing, they're paid as you go. you know, it gets funded, but then as people improve their properties, they have to pay back that pro-rata share of the improvement bond. So, I mean, I'm just wondering if that's kind of in play right now.
There are lots of things we use from the standpoint of like parks programs. There's landscape and lighting districts. There's benefit assessment districts. A lot of it depends upon what it is you're trying to accomplish and what the best mechanism is for raising that financing. Like I said, that the general aspect is it impacts individual property owners, and there hasn't really been a lot of community swell of interest to have us look at those things. It is something that we're starting to talk about at the city staff level. And most recent conversation I had was a community that told me flat out, hell no. You know, and I mean, I can't offer a lot of services if I don't have that enhanced revenue. So it was kind of a discussion of, you want it, but I can't get it to you if I don't have an additional revenue source, and they're not willing to provide the revenue source. So, you know, we have to step back from making those type of improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. We have another question from member Tornado.
Yeah, real quick. When you're doing planning, do you have anybody within our indigenous community helping guide along the way in certain sections of Sonoma County, whether it be parks and rec or anything that we're creating? Do we have any land acknowledgement?
Any land acknowledgement? It's SB 52. I might get this wrong. We are required every time we do a capital improvement project or work in a generally undisturbed land to inform the Native American population so that they're aware of the work that's going on. They have the opportunity to provide comment to ensure that we're not disturbing any artifacts or area of cultural significance. And we do that with all of our projects that result in ground disturbance. Outside of that, we do our best to incorporate individuals within a community, regardless of race or background. We try to do our best to be inclusive in that sense, so that we gain information and feedback from everyone in the community. We do vet a lot of things, especially on the park side, through the Board of Community Services. You know, it's a matter of who walks in the door to be able to provide feedback and information. But we don't really have a standalone committee that helps us develop projects. It's really more on the review side, and at this point, I'm not aware of the demographic makeup of the Board of Community Services to tell you if there's what that demographic looks like. It's predominantly been women that have been appointed there, but as far as other demographic, I couldn't tell you what the makeup is.
Okay, thank you for that. And then to add to what Sherry's saying in terms of Santa Rosa Avenue, I grew up at 3390 Santa Rosa Avenue, and I was born and raised, and I was born in that house. And, you know, I was born in '88, and it still remains, there is so much, there is a stark difference from the Freedman side to where Costco is on to downtown. I do appreciate Taylor Mountain, right? That is a good step in the right direction, whereas there has been a new playground put in place. But anything past that, it's just like you're living in the 90s again. You know, there are developments, but there is no parks, there is no resources in that area to kind of make it consistent as part of Santa Rosa. It feels very outside, and you don't really have a clear boundary. And I think that we're missing an opportunity to actually introduce Sonoma County in a better way. Even when you enter in from Santa Rosa Avenue, from Roanoke Park, where the duck pond is, You know, I grew up there, so I remember being attacked by a duck at 2 years old there. And there is really no stark difference from Roanoke Park to Santa Rosa. There's no welcome. It's bleak. It's not like we're not treating Sonoma County, Santa Rosa in particular, as we have the highest population north of San Francisco. And the next state is Oregon. Santa Rosa is not being treated as a welcome mat. And, in a lot of ways, when we give Santa Rosa a facelift, this is bringing in economy. This is changing a lot of perspective, right? So the welcome mat is basically bleak is where I'm getting at. We have Freedmen's and there's not much introducing Sonoma County or Santa Rosa. So is there any prospective development in that area to make it more welcoming?
Again, I'm not sure exactly what's coming down the line. I would certainly suggest a conversation with our Planning and Economic Development Department. They'd be able to give you what's going on. There are some capital projects that we're doing down there. We're trying desperately to get the Hearn Avenue interchange built. And we're in a funding deficit at this point. We know that is an equity issue and trying to connect both the east and west side of that southern portion of Santa Rosa. And that is a critical bottleneck for individuals that either use their bike or are pedestrians or transit riders. And so we know that we've got some investment down there, and that's restricting other activities. At one point, for example, Lowe's was looking at coming into that corner. They couldn't, partly because of the environmental issues, but the bridge itself was one of the main pieces that kept it from being a viable location. So there are capital projects we're trying to work on in an effort to make some of that space easier for enhanced development moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, real quick, in terms of eco-friendly construction and eco-friendly ideals, like even a greenway, I lived in Chicago. I also lived in Minneapolis. Are we continuously thinking eco-friendly in everything we do? What type of input in terms of that are you getting from who?
So in the best of our ability, we think eco-friendly. From the standpoint of materials, we're going to look at the environment a little differently. For example, right now you're seeing more concrete being placed on roadways as opposed to asphalt. The price point has come down. It has a 50-year life to it as opposed to asphalt that has a 20-year life. So when we think about economy, that action of placing concrete reduces our carbon footprint because we have to take less activity in and around that for reconstruction and maintenance over the course of time. So we do take some of that into consideration. When it comes to products, some of the eco-friendly products that are being put out there, like rubberized asphalt, we've not found them to be durable, which means that the value we get from using a recycled product as far as reduction in carbon footprint, we're erasing because we have to come out and touch it so often. We're increasing our activity that's increasing the carbon footprint. We are seeing more and more activities that are associated with greening our fleets. And so some of the products that we're putting in the ground are focused on environmental stability, but it's the materials that, we don't have a good price point for environmentally friendly materials right now.
Okay, and then last question, in terms of PG&E and everything that's gone on with PG&E, is any of that money being allocated to you all, or is that something that is not known?
As it stands right now, during the goal setting session, council allocated 40 million of the 95 to stabilize the city's budget. Mm-hmm. They allocated 10 million to combine with the counties, and it would be available for the RED, which is an organization that's looking to help build housing in the greater Santa Rosa area, predominantly in downtown. They agreed to do 5.25 million toward vegetation management programs to reduce fire hazard. And they agreed to invest $10 million in coordination with the Sonoma County Library District for a Roseland Library branch. And so that's what they've done so far. It leaves just under $30 million for them to continue the program. There have been conversations about investing in fire recovery efforts, but I don't know where council's going to go with the programming of that remaining funding.
Okay. That's great information. Thank you so much, Jason.
Great, thank you for all of those questions. I want to, at this time, make sure that everyone is aware that Member Moore has shared the Social Progress Index tool in the chat. So that there's a link to a PDF, and I'm sure that Danielle is able to grab that and send that to you as well, Jason, if you don't have that there. And then also wanted to bring up some information that Member Moore had shared as well. But I want to ask a couple questions of my own before I do that. I just want to remind myself that that information is there in chat. I wanted to ask about things like, very simple, but very important to a lot of people, as you've heard here, things like the pavement index that you mentioned. And I did get that joke, so I appreciate a little levity. Is the pavement index public as far as what streets are indexed at?
That's a fantastic question. I know that we release maps about every 4 years, but I don't know if we post it to our website or not. That's a good question. I'm happy to circulate through Danielle to the CAB if you'd be interested, our most current maps. Our average pavement condition index in the city is a 61 out of 100. When you drop below 60, we start to move from the good to the fair condition, and cost of doing business gets more expensive. So let me go ahead and forward that map to you, and I will inquire about where it may or may not sit on the city's website. Okay. If it does, they're under the Transportation and Public Works tab on the city's page. I believe there's a separate tab called Pavement Preservation, and it would live in there, and there'd be a description also of what PCI is and how and when we do our rating schedules.
And with that, does that index and rating take into consideration the amount of traffic and type of traffic? So more of a residential area compared to more of a commercial area, and how much traffic?
The index is actually a sampling of the physical pavement condition only. And based on the type of cracking that exists, they put it toward this rating system. And there's a series of bridge points or along that path of 0 to 100 that causes you to obtain or identify a specific rating for that street segment.
Okay. Yeah, and I remember a couple years ago, just for context sake, that with previous council members, that there was some discussion about actually allowing pavement to either disintegrate all of the way, or for some roads not to have pavement. A little bit of I remember an environmental point was being brought up around permeability, as well as cost effectiveness. But it sounds to me like that idea never really got, pun intended, off the ground.
No, it didn't really. A lot of that surfaced and started with the county, with the substantial number of miles of road they have. And in some cases, very long stretches of paved surfaces that don't service very many people. The concept of reverting some of that to gravel was definitely discussed for a long period of time. With the city, we've talked about different forms of paving. There are permeable pavements out there that are being used. Caltrans is using one on Highway 101 right now. The top 2 inches is a permeable asphalt that actually allows water to drain off and siphon to the edges so that you don't have the slipping, the hydroplaning type of issue. So there are those features out there. They do come at different costs, and that's part of the reason why we've not necessarily found them to be reasonable applications within the city for what we're looking for long term.
Great. Thanks for that information. As far as community input, I just wanted to check in and see how well our partner organizations, I'm thinking of, you mentioned some of the partner organizations with unsheltered and those that are homeless, but organizations that other departments might have, are those being utilized?
We definitely do our best. We work with community engagement, at least since community engagement has been around in the last 3 years or 4 years, to try to identify as many folks as we can. 5, it's close. So to try to gauge, not only the best method of reaching that specific community, but also trying to identify the communities that will be most interested in that conversation. Planning and economic development, as well as our community and our communication and intergovernmental relations team, have been also key partners in identifying who we should be going and reaching where we can. Great.
And with that community involvement, I understand the connection types of issues now, with Zoom and accessibility. And I've always wanted, since the days that we actually had a TV station here in Santa Rosa, to go back to some kind of a format where that lent a hand for accessibility. And I think of KRCB, and that they have somewhat of a public access to TV, and that more people have access to TVs in their homes instead of necessarily Wi-Fi, and having some interaction in that way. So I want to encourage that at some point that we make some kind of partnership with that. I know that the county did at the beginning stages of COVID and had those town halls, which seemed a little bit effective. I don't know what the feedback was on that completely, but that might be something worth looking into. And then I also wanted to bring up that there is an organization or an institute called Other Belonging Institute out of Berkeley. And I recently saw last year in November that they had an index of all the different cities within the Bay Area as far as segregation goes. And I think that when we talk about quality of life and we talk about equity and capital improvement projects, as well as our resources, that we really start to get into segregation, and the result is segregation of different populations. So that might be something worth looking at, and I can send you that link. That reminds me, by saying that, if you can share your contact information with the rest of the members, because I know that there may be lingering questions out there. And while I say that, I'm going to bring up what was in the chat from Member Moore, just encouraging that it would be great to hear back from you on some of our questions. So after you take this information back to your team, if there is a possibility in the future for you to, come back to us and share some of what has happened from the input that you've received here, being that, we're a pretty good sampling of the community, and our questions and comments were pretty deep, and talking about things like science and requirements that the staff have to follow and synthesize everything, wanting to see, how the community can interact with that and make it more accessible to the community. So I see that you did put your contact information in the chat area for all of our members. So, so any lingering questions can go there, as can be sent to Jason. It's jnutt@srcity.org, and his phone number is there as well. So if I don't see any other questions.
Magali.
Oh.
Sorry, I just wanted to, you were mentioning the Othering and Belonging Institute, and I just want to remind folks that that's one of the spaces that Dr. John Powell, I believe he's a founder, but he is a member. And so he is part of our SEED collaborative, and my apologies for the background noise. I just wanted to let y'all know.
Yeah, and how that organization came to my mind was probably connected with you, Magali, is through the Sonoma State Community Center for Engagement of Community. Yes, I believe I got that right. Okay, so some great information, and some of that information is probably better read by people like you, Mr. Nutt, because you're going to be able to understand some of that data more than someone like myself. So thank you again for that presentation. I believe at this time we may have public comment post.
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Great, thank you. And I also have from Member Barnett, if any one of us receives any questions from residents on how to take care of a pothole or other neighborhood problems, she has posted the link for reporting a problem online and a pothole repair. And that brings up a point, actually, not to keep belaying this, is that all of those things that are gathered over time, as far as input about potholes and streets and broken lights and things, is that gathered in a place to where public can see it? And why I'm asking this question real quick is because we're also used to social media and Nextdoor and these types of forums, and even on Zoom where we can see each other's questions. But sometimes when people give input, like there's a pothole down on my street that needs to be fixed, can the rest of the neighborhood see that? Or can the rest of the public see that, so that it's basically lifted to a priority because you're seeing, 3, 4, 10, 20 people say that that's important?
So I'm going to say no at this point. I will let you know that the platform that we've looked at for replacing My Santa Rosa, if it hasn't changed substantially when I evaluated it 5 years ago, and it should have only gotten better, was much more similar to our social media platforms. And you can view other people's comments. You can also view the status of what the city has done to reply to that inquiry. But you can add your voice in a I agree type of format. And so that would then get recorded. Right now, we don't really have that now that the My Santa Rosa app is gone. I don't believe that the web page tracks it the same way. And I can tell you that we have yet to implement our internal tracking system that has a public-facing component to it. So I wish I had a better, happier answer that yes, you could find it and go here. But I'm hoping to say that you will within about 6 months.
Great, thank you for that. And I believe this concludes your time here with us. I really appreciate your long evening with us and all of the great information answering our questions tonight. I hope that our questions or our comments were helpful for you.
It was very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you all for giving me your conscientious thoughts back, and I'll certainly return once we've had a chance to start to implement them into the program so that you can provide additional feedback or at least see how we're using them. Thanks. It's always fun to come and chat with the Community Advisory Board. I hope you have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. All right, and for the board, before we move on to the next items, I do have a little bit of housekeeping from the chat, and that is that we do have the general plan update survey link is in the chat. So if you scroll up through the chat, you can find that there, as well as we got information. Thank you, Magali, for the deadline is going to be sometime in April, not a hard deadline at this time, but we know that we've got a good amount of time to get that information out to organizations and folks that we know for them to participate. It's only a 5-minute survey, so they should be able to get that done. We also, right now it is 7:15, so I want to check in and see about taking a break, or if we would like to just push on through the next agenda items and presentations.
So let's have a show of hands. Who wants a break? Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break. Come back at 7:20.
Great, thank you.
Are you laughing at me?
I missed it.
I think she was laughing at my sassy way of drinking my drink.
I want to remind members as you come back that we do need cameras on so that we know that we have a quorum, I believe. Member Roberts, I saw cat ears earlier. I just want to say.
I'm in the office, so I don't get that this evening like we did last month. Oh, I know.
She's shy though. I'm gonna go grab her.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. We're all back.
Great. So we're resuming with our Community Advisory Board meeting, and we're moving on to agenda item number 7.2, which is a presentation with CAB orientation. So Danielle, you're presenting our orientation.
Yes, and I went ahead and put the CAB website into the link into the chat box for everybody. Thank you, Beth, for letting me know that the website link wasn't working properly yesterday. I went ahead and fixed it, so you should be able to see the website. And I just wanted to let everyone know that the documents that I mentioned in today's presentation, they are available on the website, including the orientation packet, the strategic plan, and associated resolutions for the CAB. So next slide, please. So welcome to the Community Advisory Board. Everyone should have received upon, well, all of our new CAB members actually should have received the orientation packet that one of the CAB subcommittees put together towards the end of last year. And we hope that it's a useful tool that provides information and an overview to the CAB. And this presentation is based on that orientation packet. So next slide, please. So the Community Advisory Board's mission is to connect city government and residents so the public can have a voice in decisions that impact their lives and build a stronger community. Next slide, please. A little bit of history on the CAB. The CAB was established in the city charter in 2002 by the City Council. The City Council created the CAB to represent views and ideas from broader community on issues of interest to the City Council. Resolution 25805, which was signed in 2003, outlines the CAB's roles and responsibilities, the CAB area boundaries, and outlined how many appointees each council member got. And believe it or not, back in 2003, there were 21 CAB members, so each council member got 3 appointees. However, in 2006, CAB was restructured and that number was reduced to what it is now, which is 14 members. So each council member gets 2 appointees, 1 CAB area appointee and 1 at-large member. Next slide, please. So in Resolution 28174, which was passed in 2012, the council further defined the roles and responsibilities of the CAB to include issues of concerns of city residents, including public safety, capital improvement program budget priorities. So that presentation that you saw here by Mr. Nutt covered what we would normally do in a town hall style meeting with the public, where then the CAB would help design a strategy to collect public feedback on infrastructure priorities for the city every year. Increase public participation and build civic capacity, community meetings and events. So there is a requirement for CAB members to each attend at least 4 community meetings or events per year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the Community Improvement Grant Program. In 2018, the CAB developed their strategic plan, which is a 5-year strategic plan, which I will get into in just a moment. But we worked with civic makers out of San Francisco to create the CAB's mission. So prior to 2018, the CAB did not actually have a mission or a vision. They did have yearly work plans centered around these roles and responsibilities I just outlined, but there was a lot of disagreement from council members, staff, and even community members about how the CAB should actually implement these different roles and responsibilities and what the CAB actually should be focused on. So with the strategic planning process, the CAB created strategic categories, goals and objectives, and 1-year work plans. Next slide, please. And so now I will go ahead and get into what that looks like. Next slide, please. So strategic category number 1 in the strategic plan is community empowerment, which is what the empowerment subcommittee of the CAB works on. So this includes implementing NeighborFest. For those new members of the board, NeighborFest is a block party program that started pre-COVID, currently is suspended, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. But we provide mini grants to neighborhood groups interested in holding these block parties to plan and implement their block parties and to align with disaster preparedness efforts after the fires. What staff does at these is they come in and they do a community asset mapping activity around disaster preparedness with the neighborhood group. In addition to that, we partner with Red Cross to come in and do individual and family disaster preparedness at the event, as well as our communications team here at the city to come to the event to talk about the different types of emergency alerts and notification systems and sign residents up for SoCo alerts. The second activity is create a civic engagement academy, which has been an ongoing project the last few years. We're starting to get closer to that. We've developed content for our Civic 101 videos, which will then go into the Civic Engagement Academy and Citizen Guidebook. 3 is proactively attend neighborhood meetings. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this hasn't happened, but the CAB did create a neighborhood and community groups list, which is incredibly robust and utilized very frequently by different city departments. So not only will the CAB be using that once we're in the clear to start attending in-person meetings and events again, but our city staff is really utilizing it as well. And number 4, which is a new area which I just mentioned, is assist our staff in creating a series of civic engagement 101 videos that are educational tools to help explain the city decision-making processes, provide an overview of city organization structure, and how to participate in public meetings and why that's important. Next slide, please. So strategic category number 2 is in community engagement expertise, which our expertise subcommittee focuses on. The activities associated with this strategic category include create a list of board assets and present 1 CAB member per meeting. This is the Meet Your CAB Member agenda items that we've had over the last 2 years on our agenda. We are shifting that a little bit moving forward. I didn't do it this evening to our new members because I hadn't had a chance to talk to them about this and I didn't want to put them on the spot. But moving forward, I will work with new members coming on board to be able to provide a brief, very short little just presentation, not real formal presentation, but just a little bit of information about themselves after they do their oaths of office. So new members last month and new members this month, don't worry, your time will come up over the next few months to do a little get to know you with the CAB in the upcoming agendas. Number 2 is create talking points, flyer, and FAQs for CAB recruitment, which was completed last year, early last year, actually. I don't even know where we are anymore. This was created early 2020 for council members to assist them in CAB recruitment. Number 3 is create an orientation packet and a mentoring program to assist new members. So we did create the orientation packet last year, and the expertise subcommittee is in the process of getting ready to implement that mentoring program. Number 4 is a new item. Create a report to present to City Council outlining successes and challenges of implementing the strategic plan and opportunities for future projects and next steps. So this group will, along with my help, create that report and presentation. And then another new activity is to update the CAB grant program to reflect current community conditions, including the pandemic. And I'll get to the grant program in just a little bit. So next slide, please. Again, next presentation will be a more thorough presentation on the grant program itself, but I just wanted to let everyone know that there's 3 resolutions associated with the CAB grant program. The first one, 28442, defines physical improvements and capacity building projects. Resolution 28686 actually provided the CAB grant or decision-making authority. So previously what would happen is the CAB would make recommendations to the City Council on which projects they wanted to fund, and then the council would formally approve those projects. So this resolution actually gives the authority making directly to the CAB. So now each year the CAB gets to make those final decisions. And then if there are any appeals by the community groups or applicants to those decisions, they can appeal directly to the City Council. Finally, Resolution 2019-124 established the NeighborFest Mini Grant Program so that NeighborFest events could be funded through the CAB grant program. The vision for that was to have NeighborFest events be the only type of project to be funded moving forward, with some physical improvement projects. So there were some areas around that the CAB decided on to keep, which had to do with the physical improvement projects. However, because of the pandemic, again, NeighborFest has been suspended. And so I will talk in my next presentation about what the vision looks like for this year's grant program. Next slide, please. Member requirements. Next slide. Okay, so there are quite a few requirements to get you up and running as a new CAB member, including from the city clerk's office, which they should have sent you an email. So you have to file every single year, file a statement of economic disclosure by April 2nd, and that is with the Fair Political Practices Commission. And like I said, it's every year by April 2nd, and if you do not do that, there are fines associated with that, as well as removal from the board. So keep an eye out in your email for that statement each year to make sure that you get it filed on time to avoid any fines. AB 1234 requires mandatory ethics trainings, which I believe there was an email sent out by the city clerk's office recently regarding this ethics training coming up. This must be completed within 12 months of your appointment. SB 1343 requires preventing workplace harassment training. So this has to happen within 6 months of your appointment and then every 2 years after. So I know that there will be, I believe beginning in April and then throughout the rest of the year, opportunities to sign up for those trainings through our organizational development and training coordinator. So there'll be an email sent out through our city clerk's office for that. There is also, this is optional, but I highly encourage everyone to look into this link, the boards, commissions, and committees training. So this was given in 2019. So this is a recording from that training, but it includes information regarding the Brown Act and information that is really pertinent to you as a member during these meetings. So please take a look at that video when you have a chance. And again, not required, but the annual boards, commissions, and committees thank you luncheon. Obviously right now, not happening due to COVID, but normally it happens every summer. It's a fantastic event, usually held at, I'm blanking on the name, the restaurant at the Bennett Valley Golf Course. all catered, completely free to you, and it's a wonderful event where the mayor gets to recognize different members from our city boards and commissions. You get to meet other members from these boards and commissions. So look out for that, hopefully coming up next year again. Next slide, please. So requirements for you from city staff. So I will provide you, like I did today, with your oath of office. So this takes place during your first meeting. And then if you decide to stay on the board so if your term is up, you decide to stay on the board and your council member reappoints you, you are required to take another oath of office after you are reappointed. And then this orientation, normally I try to hold these orientations when members are appointed, but sometimes it gets really difficult with our schedules. And so that's why I'm doing this presentation today so that everyone can receive it. And then hopefully, since will be recorded, we can go back and share the recording with new CAB members. And your responsibilities, so monthly meetings are required. They happen the fourth Wednesday of every month. You are expected to attend 75% of all monthly meetings. And so that means 2 meetings per quarter. Again, fourth Wednesday of every month. We do start at 6 p.m., but that is subject to change. Like today, we started at 5:30. If there is a change, I will try to notify you well in advance of that change. We also do not meet the fourth Wednesday of November or the fourth Wednesday of December due to the holidays. So the dates get changed for those 2 months. Subcommittee meetings, new members will be appointed to a subcommittee. And we'll talk about what your areas of interest are to make sure that the subcommittee that you get appointed to is the best fit for you. The expertise subcommittee meets the first Wednesday every month at 5:30, and the empowerment subcommittee meets the second Wednesday of every month at 6 p.m. But again, those dates are subject to change. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So other board information to know, your current chair, Leslie Graves. The mayor appoints the chair, and then the CAB gets to select their vice chair. Every year, we usually do this in February. We'll see how tonight goes. I know that we've already gone over time here, so we'll see what time it is when we get to that selection for the chair or the vice chair. Chair and vice chair work together to co-facilitate the meetings, and they meet with city staff or me once every quarter to talk about any issues of the board and also for agenda setting. And then subcommittees select their own chair to facilitate meetings. For meetings specifically, CAB members are expected to follow the rules of the Brown Act. Again, that information is in the city clerk's boards, commissions, committees training. We have to have a quorum of the board to hold our meetings, and so that is 50% plus 1. So there's 14 members, which means we need to have 8 members present to hold a meeting. Monthly meetings, I just mentioned that 8 members. And then the CAB members create the agendas. So every agenda, we have an item called future agenda items towards the end of the meeting. And that is where CAB members get to request certain items be put on an upcoming agenda. And again, I work with the chair and the vice chair to figure out which months those items will be put onto the agenda, as well as work with different departments to schedule various presentations. Next slide, please. And with that, that is the overview of the Community Advisory Board. A couple of useful resources. Again, the CAB website. So I encourage everyone to take a look at the CAB website. There you will find the orientation packet, the strategic plan, the resolutions. You'll also notice that there is a subpage called Meet Your CAB Members. All CAB members have the opportunity to have their photo and their bio placed onto that website. So if you would like that to go up there, please send me your photograph and a short bio to share with both your CAB members and the community. If you are not sure what to write about, check out the bios that are already up there on the website. The CAB grant page, srcity.org/CAB grants. This provides you with an overview of the program as well as current funded projects and previous projects that were funded. And then srcity.org/NeighborFest, all about NeighborFest, which includes the description NeighborFest, who has helped fund our program in the past. Channel 7 News did a whole segment on NeighborFest here in Santa Rosa, so the video is up there, as well as some of the photos from previous NeighborFest events. My contact information is up here for any members of the public who might be listening in who have questions about the CAB or would like to know how to apply to the CAB. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chair Graves.
Thank you for that presentation. At this time, if we have any questions or comments from the CAB members, and if you remember as well that the CAB grant presentation is coming up as item number 7.3. So if we can hold questions for the grant presentation that are specific to that until after that presentation, that'd be helpful.
I guess I should also include, this is a very weird time for this board. Normally we are out in the community. We are at events, tabling. We do tabling at the Wednesday Market, Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, a variety of other events. So this is very odd for us. Like, we have in-person meetings usually. We're supposed to be the community engagement board for the city, right? So we won't be virtual forever. So just know that the items that I listed in the strategic plan might sound like a bunch of, maybe some busy work, but we do a lot of community engagement on top of that work that subcommittees are doing. So, and Cherie is our resident CAB member, long-term CAB member. She's our historian for CAB. She's been with the CAB before me. So any historical questions can go to her. She has a lot of information.
Great. Are there any board members with questions? See, everybody is staying mute. Oh, member Tornado, yes, I see you. There you go.
No questions other than thank you, Danielle, for that presentation and taking the time to go through all of that with us.
Sure.
Yeah, it looks like there's no questions, but I want to definitely echo that. Thank you so much for going through the orientation and also definitely mentioning that we are in strange times. COVID last year in 2020, our February meeting was our last in-person meeting for those members that are coming new onto the Community Advisory Board. So this is coming up to somewhat of an annual recognition here that we have been in this COVID predicament. And also it's more than a predicament. We also have to remember that there's been lives lost while we've been fretting about how to stay engaged with the community and how to meet. We did have a good, I want to say, at least 6 months where we didn't meet in 2020 because this format wasn't completely developed in order for us to do that and to stay within all the rules and regulations. So those of you that are joining us, you are getting the benefit of us kind of maturing a little bit, but I'm sure that we have a lot more that we can mature in order to carry forth this type of a format and still stay engaged with the community. So I encourage you all to stay engaged with your community groups, organizations, and neighborhoods and bring that information back to the CAB. So at this time, if we have any public comment.
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Great, thank you. And We are moving on. This is going to be item number 7.3, and this is the presentation on the 2021 Community Improvement Grant Program. And Danielle, I believe you have that again.
Yes, I do. All right, so wait for the presentation to come up here. Perfect. All right, so as mentioned before, the Community Advisory Board has a Community Improvement Grant Program, which has seen many variations before. So I will try to walk you through the background of the program and then talk about next steps for this year. So next slide, please. So the purpose of the CAB grant program, or Community Improvement Program, we call it CIG, not to be confused with CIP and the presentation that Jason did earlier. But this program supports community building, improves neighborhoods, and strengthens relationships among residents. Grants can include public and community improvements, community events and practices, and may include other elements and activities. All grant requests must be inclusive, accessible, free of charge to participants, and focus on broad community support. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, the CAB grant program has seen various iterations as well as decision-making processes. So CAB does make those final decisions on grants now. Up until now, so between 2019 and now, the CAB has actually changed the focus of the grant program to focus on NeighborFest events. But those events can include physical improvement projects. However, as we all know, pandemic, NeighborFest has been suspended. So now we have to find a new way to move forward. Next slide, please. Just what I just said, first bullet point. In early 2020, the CAB actually approved 6 neighborhoods to do NeighborFest events, including about half of those with physical improvement projects like creation of murals. I think there was like a cleanup day or something around that. Actually, there were 2 murals. However, because it's been suspended, what we've decided to do is allow those groups that proposed a community or physical improvement project to move forward with those physical improvement projects without NeighborFest. What we've asked them to do is submit a statement of how they propose to keep their project participants safe, social distancing protocols, the use of masks, gloves, etc. For those that submitted a proposal for NeighborFest only, they had 2 options. They could just call it a wash and reapply for this year, or they could propose a physical improvement project to conduct in lieu of their NeighborFest event for up to $2,500. If they decided to do this, then they would not be able to apply for this 2021 cycle because they decided to move forward with their 2020 funding. So we've had one neighborhood group ask if they could do that, and that was South Park Community Building Group. So they're supposed to be getting me a project proposal by the end of the month. Proctor Terrace has decided to move forward with their physical improvement project, which was a mural on school campus. And the Latino Service Providers Youth Promotores decided to move forward as well with their mural on the Cook and Cesar Chavez Language Academy campus. So those 3 groups will be doing their physical improvement projects. I still have not heard from the other groups, so I'm going to try to circle back with them. However, if we don't hear back from them, I will assume that they're just going to wait to hold their NeighborFest at a date when we can all come together and be one as a community. So for the next cycle, for this year only, and we'll talk about what next year looks like too, is community improvement projects only. Since we can't get together in large groups for NeighborFest, we will go ahead for this year and fund those community improvement projects. So next slide, please. So the focus areas. So we want to make sure that we align with council goals and priorities. This includes pandemic recovery. So what that would look like for community improvement projects. So this could be a food distribution event. It could be building of a community garden or another alternative food source, school supply distribution event, or other eligible projects that would help out with pandemic recovery. Racial equity and social justice projects. So this could be art projects like murals, crosswalk paintings, quilt makings, yard bombing projects. Again, community gardens, anti-racism training and community dialogues. A lot of opportunity around that currently. For homelessness, this is where this might get a little bit tricky, but we will do our best to work with applicants who want to do a project around homelessness. Projects may be funded if they align with city goals and services around homelessness. They must, so if they're going to do like a food distribution event or a clothing distribution event, we really want them to partner with a homeless services agency to make that happen. What we don't want to have happen, which we've seen in the past, is while very well intended, people will go donate, you know, a stack of blankets or jackets to a particular encampment, and then there is no need for that at that time at that encampment, and they get left behind and they become trash. We don't want those items to go to waste. And so we're asking that if there is a group that wants to do a project around homelessness for distribution, to work with a homeless services agency to make that happen. And we can talk more about that if there is a group that comes forward with a project proposal. So city staff and CAB members are more than welcome to help out applicants. And we can talk about that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, so disaster preparedness. So in lieu of NeighborFest, you know, there's not a whole lot going on as far as community or neighborhood preparedness. And so some of the projects that have come up in the past are go bag creations or preparedness plans for neighborhoods. So those are some just examples of types of projects that can be funded. General community building activities. So the council actually has one of their goals is to strengthen neighborhood assets and neighborhood relationships. And so these projects will also fit in a community cleanup day, community garden. That is like one of the biggest themes in this program. It could go towards a lot of different focus areas. Art projects as well. Memorial projects, benches, plaque purchases and installation. So money can be used towards that. Youth-led projects and neighborhood group development. And so I want to clarify, in the past, we've done printing of neighborhood newsletters. We don't want to go that route this time. We want to do things like helping a neighborhood group if they want to establish a neighborhood association, develop their communications plan. So let's say they want to build a website. We want to be able to help them to be able to do that. Neighborhood leadership training. Maybe the neighborhood group wants to improve on their skills around leadership or around another type of skill. So we could definitely fund those types of projects through this program. Next slide, please. Other eligibility criteria. So again, projects must be free and open to all community members to participate. All projects must have a statement outlining social distancing protocols and safety measures to make sure all participants are safe. Projects that take place on city property must have prior approval from city staff. Public art projects must go through the public arts process. And again, city staff, we can help out make that happen. All projects must have clear community support. And projects must have a one-to-one budget match. And so this can be through a variety of different ways. It can be through volunteer hours. It can be through other funding sources like grants, donations, etc. And when I mentioned earlier that staff can help out with the application process and CAB members can also help out, CAB members are more than welcome to help out the neighborhood or community group in filling out their application. However, if you decide to do that, you have to recuse yourself from voting on that particular project. In addition to that, we will be holding workshops for applicants so that they can answer or ask all the questions that they need to ask to make sure that that they turn in a completed and eligible application. Next slide, please. Non-eligible projects. So any project that does not align with city council goals and priorities. Again, printing of neighborhood newsletters. Right now, community events, unfortunately, we cannot approve those. Projects that promote racism or hate speech or actions. Staff salaries and indirect costs are not eligible. Fundraising projects, ongoing maintenance of projects, seed money or business startup funds. Costs, individual trainings or education. So it has to be a group, again, open to everyone to participate. And costs cannot be incurred prior to the grant. So CAB actually has to approve the project for funding, and then the neighborhood or community group can then can start their project. Next slide, please. We also have a new timeline. So the CAB used to have one deadline. So just as an example, the application would be released at the beginning of May and we due by the end of July. And then they would make their decision sometime in September or October, and then the projects could start after that. We would like to do a quarterly application process to allow more community groups and neighborhood groups to apply throughout the year. So the first one will open April 1st and end June 30th. Then it'll be July 1st through September 30th, and then October 1st through December 31st. What will happen, that will look like, so those applications will be due June 30th. Staff, meaning me, will review all applications for eligibility. I would provide those to the CAB before your meeting, and then in the July meeting, you would choose those particular projects that you would like to fund out of that round, and then so on and so forth. Applicants then who are approved for funding would have a full year to complete their project and submit for reimbursement. Next slide, please. So that is the proposal for this year's grant program and an overview of the grant program. Resources again, I mentioned this in our last presentation. There is the CAB website and the CAB grant website. So now we'll turn it back over to Chair Graves to take questions.
Yes, thank you. Lots of information there. It's great to see some of the new information that has come out that might bring up some questions.
Yeah.
So open it up to questions now.
I see Member Steffi has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you. Member Steffi.
Hi, this is great. Thank you so much for doing that. And I have to, I guess, true confession time. I'm brand new. Victoria Fleming just asked me to join this board. I did not know about this grant program. And I think it's awesome. And so my main question is, how do people find out about it who have these great ideas in the community? Yeah. What outreach do you do? And do you need more help getting the word out? I assume part of that is us letting people know about it. So yeah. I'm just curious what the main avenues are for you to let people know.
Yeah, that is a great question. So we do extensive outreach to the community. CAB members are one way of doing that. And so we highly encourage you to promote this on your social media accounts. If you have a neighborhood group, making sure it gets in the newsletter for your neighborhood group, on their website, etc. And then we go through all of our city communication channels. So we go through our City Connections newsletter, post it on the website, social media posts. We do posting to Nextdoor and Twitter as well, Facebook, mentioned that. And then we also take out, usually we take out advertisements in Press Democrat, La Prensa. Sorry, application is available in English and Spanish. The workshops, there will be one in English, one in Spanish. And then we also do radio ads as well in both English and Spanish. And so we partner up with some of the radio stations here locally to do that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Obviously, you've got that covered. I just maybe have been under a rock for the last few years. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
And I want to point out with that I think that the last time that push of promotion happened would be, and I'm going to let Danielle fill that blank in for me, sometime in 2019, early.
That's correct. I believe we released the application in we tried something different last time and it clearly didn't work. So we moved the timeline around to, I think it was September of 2019. We realized that didn't work because then we had the power outages and the fires, and we extended the deadline, and still very few applicants. And so we're trying something a little bit different this time too, to see if the quarterly system works. And last time was also NeighborFest, so it was new and people didn't know what that was. And so I think we needed to do a better job last time of kind of doing some education around NeighborFest and why it's important. But we're back to just the community improvement projects. So I'm pretty sure we will get a lot of applications in. In 2017, 2018, we received over 50 applications, I believe. It was an incredibly hard decision for the CAB to make. So just, I guess everyone know that this has the potential for a lot of applications to come in, and we don't have, I totally forgot to look to see how much we have. So I'll get that information out to the board tomorrow, but we don't have enough funding to fund everybody. And so it can be a competitive process. And so we want to make sure that, through these workshops and through you guys yourselves, that we provide as much information and assistance to community groups that want to participate in applying, to make sure that they turn in applications that are complete and that are eligible. And I'll tell you right now, because it's so competitive, if an application is not complete, we generally don't accept the application, because that's a lot of work for me on the back end to have to continually follow up with people hey, you're missing a budget, or hey, you're missing this, or you're missing that. And then the other thing too is it has to be eligible. And so we hope that these workshops are new as well. So we're hoping that helps out with the application process as well moving forward. I see Jorge has his hand up.
Great. And I see you, member Inocencio. I'm just gonna have to drill myself on that. And I did see member Tornado after him, so I want to make sure get that. Go ahead.
Yeah. First question was, I think I missed the part in the presentation. You mentioned that CAB members would have to recuse themselves. Could you repeat that? I missed that part.
Sure. So if you do help a neighborhood or community group fill out their application and provide them with assistance in applying, you are asked to recuse yourself from voting on that particular project because you had a hand in filling out the application. It just, it's a conflict of interest basically. And so we do ask you to recuse yourself, and it's happened in the past. There have been, for example, we had a member who was an employee for Catholic Charities. She had to recuse herself from their application for their particular project. So.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And then another quick question: is there a place where we could see past projects? I know we have the NeighborFest website, but is there a way to see pictures or more details?
Yeah. So srcity.org/CAB grants. If you scroll down to the bottom of that, there should be a list of previous projects. And I believe I put on, it's been a while since I've looked at that, so I will go and look at it tomorrow. But there should be pictures from previous projects as well on that website.
Okay. And then the final question is, kind of once we come out of COVID, right, I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for community building and how we as a board and as a city engage with our community and build community as much as possible. So is there any way that more grants can be done than the money we currently have allocated? Is there any way we can lobby for more to have more community building initiatives?
That's up to the council. They're the ones who allocate the funding for these grants. So, during goal setting and budget setting hearings, that's the opportunity for the CAB to really push council for more funding. Currently, they give, so it's $5,000 per district, so $35,000. Although we have seen that some of the districts haven't been applying over the last couple of years. So hopefully now that we have more representation from some of our underrepresented districts, we can get projects going in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just have one question.
Sure.
In terms of promotion, right? Like advertising these grants and whatnot, could we just highlight COVID safe, initiatives? Because I think that's really, really important in the wording, because a lot of times the more specific, the better, especially during the pandemic. Just with even our youth and getting it out there with our youth. I don't know if we do anything on social media in terms of Facebook or Instagram, but really right now in the pandemic, I see us promoting this a lot to the youth as well, who have suffered a lot, like all of us, right? But in a different way.
Yeah.
To express themselves.
Yeah, definitely. So in the application packet itself, it's outlined in several areas, including the questions that they have to answer. That all projects have to demonstrate safety for the in the pandemic. So what are you going to do to keep all of your participants safe? And I will say that the CAB actually has the opportunity as well, as we develop our valuation tool for the applications. We can actually put in there that one of the criteria is that they've demonstrated how they will keep participants safe in that tool, and in any outreach material that we put out. So we actually have to, on all of those outreach materials, put language around ADA accessibility. So I think we can definitely add the pandemic safety information to that as well. I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the questions. And any other questions? I don't see any. So just a couple from me. You mentioned that the $35,000, $5,000 per district. Does it roll over from year to year?
So it does. Yeah. So that's why I said I'll get you a number tomorrow. I meant to look it up and I forgot. So we had it last year. It was around 83,000, but then we had the 2020 projects that still had to be completed. So I've got to subtract that from there and see what we have left over. So I will get that number to you tomorrow, but also note that council is going to be going into budget hearings. So while the April through June, we have, the funds set aside for this fiscal year, we'll probably have more money for the next fiscal year, right? So it just depends on how council decides to go and what amount. It's always been 35,000. However, they could change their mind and reduce that if there are budget constraints going on. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Great. And so I'm curious that we had the grant set up to where we were doing that annually before, and then that would kind of dictate that there's only so much money, so that we'd only have so many applications that could go through. And I can remember, saying like for the neighborhood fest, it'd be one per district or two or something like that. If it's quarterly, then what's the number?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what the applications look like, number one, and number two, how much money we have left over. We'll have to decide on how many projects per quarter based on the money that we have.
Okay.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. All right.
I think the expertise subcommittee can definitely help us figure that out when we start developing the evaluation tool.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And I really love the quarter program, because I also think that that's going to help to get the word out, because we're going to be saying that the applications are available more often than that just one time of the year. So we're going to have more engagement with that, I think. So
yeah,
it's a great plan.
Yep.
So with that being the end of the questions, any public comment?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Great. That means that we're moving on. Thank you again, Danielle, for the presentation.
Yeah.
At this time, remember that you had a question mark with this. It is 8:12 at this time, and this is agenda item number 7.4, CAB Vice Chair selection.
Yeah. Not only a matter of time, but also we have a lot of new members coming on, and we have, I believe we still have 4 seats still to fill. And so I would actually request that we push this item back till next month, so that we have, if we're going to have new members coming on board, they can be a part of this process. Unless you desperately need somebody to help you co-chair these meetings.
I am okay, and I think that just for accessibility and equity, we have new members that are just joining us tonight. You're just getting the information. This is something to consider. I think everybody is eligible to be co-chair and to put forth a nomination for another member. So I encourage everybody to consider that as an opportunity. And
yeah. I don't think that you necessarily have to have that historical background to be a long-standing CAB member. And if you are interested, but aren't really sure what the vice chair really does, or kind of want to know more about facilitating a meeting, just reach out to me and I can walk you through it. You can also go ahead and watch all of the CAB video recordings that took place previously, just to see how the flow of it goes. But I definitely want to make sure that the vote, we have as many members as possible participate in that vote, including new members.
Great.
Okay.
So is this something that we need to vote on?
No, you can just table it for next month.
Okay. So it looks like I saw a lot of heads nodding yes, and I saw no one shaking their head no. So I'm going to take that as an indication that it will be okay for me to go ahead and table 7.4 and move on to 7.5, which is issues of concerns to city residents. And this is a standing agenda item. CAB members will report on issues of concern to community members within their CAB areas and the city as a whole. Community members may use public comment during this item to bring issues of concern to the CAB. So at this time, do we have CAB members with any issues to report?
Let me jump in there really quick. This is not, you're not required to do this, bring any issues of concern. This is only if you have them. And then the CAB can decide on whether or not to take any action on those items. If, you know, maybe we need to let council know, or if it's an item that we can refer to another department or other city staff, we'll make the decision on how to move forward with that. But just want to let everyone know it's a standing agenda item, so there will be time every month to bring these items forward.
And I see Member Moore.
Thank you for putting this as a standing item. I think, I know we discussed this a little bit in the expertise subcommittee, and in case this agenda item starts generating a lot of interest, how would you suggest that we notify you so that you can kind of track how much time might need to be allotted for this item? And we may not always have too much time ahead to let you know, but it just seems like to manage it, this could get big.
It could. That is a good question. I guess, the only way that I can see this happening right now is to email those things directly to me before the meeting, so I can kind of gauge what's coming and just let everyone know, like, hey, it looks like we'll need this amount of time. So just to let everyone know too, I was going to bring this up earlier, but we are in the process of procuring, I think I've said this before, procuring a digital engagement platform, which will allow us to do a variety of different online engagement activities with the community. Still waiting for that to be finalized, but once it's up and running, it's going to be really amazing. And I think that is another way to collect those issues of concern. So whether it's one of you as a CAB member going on to that site, however we decide to do it, there's so many different tools. There's polling and surveys, there's post-it notes for ideas, there's open forums, there's maps, etc. So we can figure out the best tool on that platform to use and create that as a way to document those concerns. But for right now, since we don't have it, I guess emailing me would be the best way to do it. Yeah. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. I've tried a spreadsheet before. That was not useful. Nobody used it. So just email those concerns to me, and what I'll do is I'll put together a list. As long as they come into me by 5 o'clock before the meeting, then I can put a list together and then share my screen so that everyone can see what was submitted, and then those members can provide a little bit of background on those pieces. Okay.
Great. Do I see any other hands up for bringing forth any issues? The first time, this might be just kind of catching us off guard a little bit. So we'll have something for you next time.
No worries. No worries. I mean, this is like any new process. It's gonna be a little awkward in the beginning. I just think that this is a good way to start documenting those issues of concerns that city residents are bringing forward. As Carly stated, we can keep like a log of those, right? Because we've collected these things in person in the past, and they've always been, sent off to whatever department. We get a lot of this information at the in-person events, but it hasn't happened because we've been virtual. So I think moving forward, even when we're back in person, we can still have this as a standing agenda item, but this will be a good way to track it too, because we weren't tracking them before. Okay.
That's great. Just in case anybody, go ahead.
Member Tornado has her hand up.
Yes.
To add to CAB meetings and whatnot, as a collective, as all of us, and could we put out a letter in terms of to our community, because we're in community engagement. So if there were, for example, anti-Asian rhetoric, I've had a lot of youth come to me and say, like, what city officials can make a statement? And I see an organization and a collective like CAB being able to make statements against anti-hate and things like that without getting too political, but just in terms of, we won't put up with hate in our community. And these are rules that we already basically abide by in our what I've signed up for. If we made public statements, are we as a collective able to do that?
I believe that we are. or that the board is, the board has to agree to that, to do that. You know, there has to be a letter or a statement drafted, and then the board has to be able to view it and then vote, yes, we agree with it. And then it actually gets released by the chair. So yeah, I mean, it is something that the board can do.
Okay, because you know, in terms of community engagement, that's all part of it, is making our community feel safe. So,
okay,
thank you.
Great. That really, thanks for bringing that to light. You know, having that opportunity, and Danielle, I know you'll get back to us.
Yeah.
With the procedures around that.
Yep.
I was just going to bring up that we do have, just in case anybody finds this as an issue, you're going out and talking to people. As we all know, sometimes people talk about that trash and that you know, appearance around their neighborhoods and in the community. The city council just approved, and it is already in action, a new 4-person transportation and public works group that are staff that are going out and picking up trash on a proactive basis, and they have a routine as well as they're fielding calls. So that information, I will look for that. I know I have it handy. I'll look for that information and put it in chat, because that's something to be kind of have in your back pocket for when people are asking, like, how do we get to it? And since that Santa Rosa app isn't completely functional, this actually has, I think, a phone number attached to it. So there you go. So any public comments?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. And the next agenda item is 7.6, CAB subcommittee updates. For the subcommittee of empowerment, I can say that we did not have a meeting in our last month because we didn't have a quorum. So we'll be tabling that until this next upcoming month. And hopefully we'll have some new members, so that'll be great. And then we also have subcommittee expertise. Is there anybody here from that subcommittee that would like to make a report? Member Foster, thank you.
Well, I think Danielle probably has the most information collectively and otherwise. But, you know, as we've been going through the agenda tonight, I'm thinking that, and particularly since we have so many new members and there's so much information, and we've talked about orientation and mentoring and all of that. I mean, I've been on boards before. I think that I propose that new members get a binder with, you know, dividers that kind of have different areas of what this board does and how it performs and what the restrictions and guidelines and all of that. I mean, I'm fairly new to the board. Obviously, there are some newer members than me, but it would be nice to get something instead of emails and PDFs, and something that puts it all in one place where you could review it and reference it on an ongoing basis, so that you kind of know what we're doing, and you know, you can print things out and agendas and put it in that binder. I don't know if we have any budget for that, but I think it would be important. So that's all I have to say about my subcommittee, and then I'll refer to Danielle, because she seems to be, you know, on top of how this committee has progressed over time.
We actually do have some funds for in our meetings category for stuff like that when we meet in person. So definitely can make that happen if that is something that the CAB wants to do. We have a ton of binders here as it is. We save all of like our old ones, and so there's plenty to go around. So if we want to do that, it's just a matter of I have to coordinate that with our staff to help put those together. I think that's a great idea. I know that I like binders. It keeps me organized. I know that Carly likes binders.
There's also the option perhaps of doing the PDF binder, so it could be digital as well.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do both. For those who want the digital, we can do that. For those who want a hard copy, we can put that together too. And then Carly, did we have anything else for expertise that you wanted to cover?
Well, just want to acknowledge that, Member Foster was saying the orientation, which by the way, you did a great job putting that presentation together.
Thank you.
The mentorship, these are things that we talked in depth in our subcommittee that are now part of this meeting. And one of the other things that we covered, and I have to admit, since we met almost a month ago, Member Barnett helped me remember from my scribble notes that we also reviewed our strategic plan in the expertise level work plan, not the overall, just to see how we were doing and progressing and reaching our goals and where we were at. Because what we found, and I'm just sharing this because we do have a lot of new members, there was an operations subcommittee that did complete their goals. So those members merged into the expertise.
Yeah.
And so the further along that we get, because it was a 3-year plan, we've completed a lot of things, and we want to see if we can be open to new things and how we would go about that. So we just spent time kind of assessing where we're at and to help determine next steps. We haven't figured that out yet. I think we were gonna kind of wait for the empowerment subcommittee to also do something like that, because they were working on some current items that relate to the things that we are doing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great. And I did write in my notes to follow back up on that with the empowerment subcommittee. So thanks, Member Moore. That looks like that might have been the end of the subcommittee updates. Are there any questions from board members around the updates? No, I see none. Public comment?
No public comments.
Thank you. And that means that we're moving on to our last agenda item. Correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, but we have future agenda items as number 8. And this gives us an ability to look over the potential future agenda items that we have talked about in the past and make any input, as well as potentially add future agenda items to this list. For the March meeting, I will bring up that it was the Community Empowerment Plan listening session report. Also for that March meeting, it is the county homeless count. And I believe I actually took I was a little bit of a word in Danielle's ear to make that item, because we had talked about actually having on the March agenda the housing project that Catholic Charities is in charge of, that is in kind of the St. Rose downtown area. And Danielle was able to send us all a presentation, a recording of a presentation, so that we could look at that. And instead of having a presentation about that project, we're now going to have a presentation about the county homeless count, so that we can learn more about that. Then number 3, the standing agenda item would be the subcommittee report outs, as well as the issues of concerns of city residents. And then for upcoming agendas after March, here are some future agenda potential items. Sonoma County Commission on Human Rights report. That's still to be determined as far as the date. We are anxiously awaiting for the city council to take up that report first. Then the Recreation and Parks Department presentation, tentatively scheduled for possibly April. Then the City of Santa Rosa Equity Officer and introductions, I believe, would tentatively happen in May. And lastly, the Community Engagement Division strategic plan, and that would also be determined in the future as to when we would see that. Do we have any board members wanting to add to those future agenda items? I don't see, oh yes, Member Barnett, thank you.
I'd like us to consider bringing back the get to know your cab member, since we have so many new appointments. And if we want, and it's possible if we want to start off with possibly having our staff reintroduce, that's another way of doing it. I know. But we have so many new members, and I think it's a helpful tool for the board to know who's on our board and the skills that they bring to the table and who they work with and projects that they've worked on. I think it's a helpful tool because we're in this format, but I feel like it's one of those things that we were starting with when we were meeting in person, and it's hard to do in a virtual setting, but I think it's helpful, especially with the other pieces of our strategic planning.
Great. Yes. I think the more that we can feel connected to each other through this virtual reality that we're all experiencing would be good. I just got a message, moving forward, CAB members will receive a Zoom link for meetings about 1.5 hours before the meeting starts.
Yeah, so you'll see the Zoom link in the agenda. Don't use that link. What'll happen is we will send out a special link for board members. This will allow you guys to enter the meeting and automatically be promoted to this screen instead of having our staff have to individually add everybody to the meeting. So don't use the link in the agenda, use the link. And the reason why it says 1.5 hours is because it's automatic. Zoom sends it out. So just look for that. And our Zoom host has said, if you use the link in the agenda, she can still promote you. But this will just allow you in quicker than that. So
I'm sure you'll kind of give us a little heads up on our calendar invite about that, because there's a lot of days between now and the next meeting, and we might forget that. So thank you. And then any other agenda considerations? Yes.
Has the general plan update already been, have they given a presentation to how they plan on doing community engagement to CAB? Or?
They have.
Okay.
Yeah, they have. So what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll find it. It was oh my gosh. I'll go back and find it. We might have to have a updated presentation though, because that particular presentation was around engagement strategies for the overall 3-year project. And so it might be helpful if we have staff come back to do kind of where they're at, right, with the update. So I'll add that to the agenda.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Tornado.
Is there any way we could do, or maybe it already exists, where we have a Google Doc or, a shared drive within CAB members so that we could access all these resources in terms of all this paper?
Yes. We do have a Dropbox, but I need to update it. So once I update it, because I think I'm out of space, so I can't add anything else. Okay. So I'll work on fixing that and then provide the link to the updated Dropbox.
Okay, that way we could even reference back to even community flyers within wherever we're working with, Thank you.
Great, thanks. Danielle, your list must be extremely long at this point. So thank you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Thank you for doing all of the work that you do, and always with a smile. So thank you so much for that. I think at this point, it looks like there's no other agenda items to consider from members. So any public comment on future agenda items?
There are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. And at this time, it looks like we would be open to a motion for adjournment.
Motion to close.
That was Member Roberts and Member
Second.
Foster.
Second the motion.
Oh,
Okay.
dueling. Okay, you can
just
choose
wanted
Foster
to-
or Baldonegro.
Mr. Foster could take it, that's fine.
There you go.
No, I just wanted to welcome the new members, and I look forward to working with you all. And thank you for wanting to be involved, and look forward to our future time together.
Thank you, Member Foster. That's a great way to kind of call it a night. It looks like we had a motion and a second, so we are adjourning. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening. We look forward to seeing you at subcommittees in our next meeting next month. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.